As she gathered her things to leave, the reality of what had taken place began to settle in. She had just sung in front of hundreds of people, and instead of retreating into the shadows, she had embraced the spotlight. Her nerves had almost paralyzed her, but she had overcome them. She had done something brave, something she had once thought impossible. The emotions were overwhelming: pride, excitement, disbelief. And yet, she couldn't help but feel a new sense of freedom. She had taken control of her own story. But even as she left the gala that night, her mind kept going back to the man who had shamed her earlier. The CEO. His apology had been unexpected, but it had also been an important part of her journey. For so long, she had allowed herself to feel inferior, to feel like she wasn't worthy of being noticed. But tonight, she had proved otherwise. It wasn't just about him apologizing. It was about her realizing her worth and not letting anyone make her feel small. His harsh words, though hurtful at the time, had ignited something in her. It was almost as if his judgment had pushed her to rise above it. As she stepped out into the cool night air, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out, surprised to see a message from one of the guests who had spoken to her earlier. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out," the message read. "But I wanted to say again how amazing you were tonight. If you're ever interested in exploring music further, I'd love to help. There's a lot of potential there." Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't something she had expected. To be contacted by someone in the music industry, someone who believed in her talent, it felt like a dream. She hadn't even realized how much she needed that kind of validation until now. The message was a reminder that there were opportunities out there, waiting for her to grab hold of them. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to take a chance. The next few days were a whirlwind. She found herself thinking constantly about the performance, about the people who had offered their support, and about what might come next. She spent hours reflecting on her life, on how she had let herself be defined by other people's expectations, and how, for so long, she had hidden her true potential. The fear of judgment, of failure, had kept her from pursuing her dreams. But now, she was starting to realize that her dreams were worth chasing, that she didn't have to stay in the shadows forever. She reached out to the person from the gala who had offered to help her with music. They arranged to meet, and as she sat down with them to talk, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. This was real. She wasn't just dreaming anymore. She was taking action. She didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare her. It felt like the beginning of something new, something that she had put on hold for too long. But now, she was ready to embrace it fully. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how far she had come in such a short time. She had started that night with her head down, quietly, doing her job, trying to stay out of the way. But now, she was standing tall, looking forward to what lay ahead. She had discovered a strength within herself that she hadn't known was there. The journey wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready to take it. For once, she wasn't afraid to dream. She wasn't afraid to reach for something bigger than herself. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift of all. The days that followed the gala were filled with a mix of emotions. It was hard to believe that just a few days ago, she had been working as a cashier at a grand event, simply trying to get through the night without drawing too much attention. Now, she was walking through a new door, one that she had never thought would open for her. The messages from the people at the gala, the offer from the music industry professional. It all felt so surreal, like she was in the middle of a dream that she didn't want to wake up from. She spent the following days trying to sort through everything that had happened. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. The offer to pursue music professionally had set off a series of emotions: excitement, doubt, fear, hope. She had never imagined her life could take such a turn. Singing had always been something she did for herself, something she did when no one was watching. But now, people were taking notice. People who saw something in her, something she had spent years hiding. She wasn't sure if she was ready to jump into this new world, but a part of her knew she had to try. The possibilities felt endless. One evening, after a long day of thinking and reflecting, she sat down at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand. Her mind kept drifting back to the performance, the applause, the praise. It was like a moment, frozen in time. She had proven to herself that she could face her fears, that she could be more than just someone working in the background. That night had been a turning point, a moment where she had truly realized that she was capable of so much more than she had ever given herself credit for. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was the music professional from the Gala, asking if she was still interested in exploring music further. She had expected that message, but now that it was here, she felt a rush of nerves. Could she really do this? Could she step into a world so different from what she knew? She had spent so long in the shadows, afraid to step into the spotlight, and now the opportunity was right in front of her. Without overthinking it, she quickly replied, agreeing to meet up and talk about the next steps. The excitement she felt was tempered by doubt, but she knew that if she didn't at least try, she would always wonder what might have been, and she didn't want to live with that regret. A few days later, they met at a small cafe. The conversation was casual at first, just two people getting to know one another. The person who had offered to help her was kind and encouraging, asking her about her background, her experience, and what she wanted out of this opportunity. She shared her story, how she had once been part of a choir, how music had always been a passion, but how life had pushed her away from it. She told them about the gala, about how she had felt completely out of place at first, but how everything had changed when she started singing. The music professional listened intently, nodding and offering words of encouragement. "You've got something real," they said. "It's clear that music means a lot to you. If you want to take this seriously, we can help you get started." For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel hope. The path ahead wasn't clear, but it was there. There were no guarantees, but there was a chance, something she hadn't felt in a while. She didn't know what this would lead to, but she was ready to take the first step. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift in her life. She started taking lessons, learning about the technical side of singing, honing her voice, and becoming more confident in her abilities. She spent hours practicing, working on songs, and slowly building her confidence. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when she questioned if she was good enough, but those moments became fewer as she grew stronger. One evening, as she stood in front of a mirror, singing along to a song, she saw herself in a way she hadn't before. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. She was someone who had dared to dream, someone who had stepped out of her comfort zone and decided to take a chance on herself. That realization hit her like a wave. She wasn't defined by her job, by what people thought of her, or by the small mistakes she had made in the past. She was something more. The journey wasn't easy, but with each passing day, she felt more like herself, more like the person she had always known she could be, but had never had the courage to show. The opportunity that had come out of nowhere had opened her eyes to the fact that she didn't have to settle, she didn't have to hide, and maybe, just maybe, this new path would lead her to a life she had only dreamed of. The night was nothing short of magical. The gala was held in a luxurious grand hall that shimmered under the light of massive chandeliers. Guests, all dressed in their finest clothes, mingled, sipped champagne, and admired the exquisite decorations that filled the space. The air was thick with the sound of light chatter and laughter, with the clink of glasses echoing in the background. The event was hosted by one of the biggest companies in the industry, drawing in high-profile guests from all over the city. It was an evening for the elites, a night to remember, full of grandeur and excitement. Among the sea of well-dressed attendees was one individual who didn't quite fit the scene. A young woman worked behind the scenes, helping with the event. She wasn't dressed in an evening gown like the others. Instead, she wore a simple black dress, a name tag pinned to her chest, and flat shoes that were comfortable enough for her long shift. She stood by the entrance, checking tickets and welcoming guests, a job that was crucial yet unnoticeable. Most people walked past her without a second thought, too caught up in their own conversations and excitement. Despite the glitz and glamour of the night, she was used to the anonymity of her job. She didn't mind it, in fact. She preferred it. It was a humbling experience. And while she didn't share the same lifestyle as the guests around her, she had learned to embrace her role. She was there to do her part, and that was enough. The noise of the event, the laughter and conversations, only felt distant to her. Her focus was solely on ensuring everything ran smoothly. She smiled as guests passed through the door, each person more polished and elegant than the last. However, that night, things didn't go as smoothly as planned. It was a minor mistake, a small slip-up that anyone could have made under the pressure of managing a high-class event. A guest, arriving a little late, presented their ticket at the door. She checked it, but in her nervousness, she failed to validate it properly. She was focused on everything happening around her, and in the heat of the moment, she didn't catch that the ticket was slightly out of date. The guest's name didn't match the one on the guest list. Before she could fix it or offer an apology, someone stepped in, making a scene. A tall man, dressed in an expensive suit with a sharp look about him, walked over with an air of superiority. He was a key figure in the business world, the CEO of a powerful company, someone who was used to getting his way. He eyed the situation with a critical look, immediately noticing the mistake. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and, in a voice loud enough for several people nearby to hear, mocked her. "Unbelievable," he said, shaking his head. "How can someone like you not even get a simple thing like ticket verification right? You're just a cashier after all. Maybe you should stick to jobs that match your skill set." The words hit her like a slap in the face. It was a moment she would never forget. Her heart sank. She could feel the eyes of the people around her. She wasn't sure if it was pity or judgment in their gazes, but she felt small, so small. His words, sharp and public, echoed in her mind. The embarrassment was almost too much to bear. Despite the sting, she held her head high. She couldn't let him see how deeply his words had cut her. She apologized quickly, trying to fix the issue with professionalism, even though her hands were trembling. She didn't want to make a scene. This was her job, and as degrading as it felt in that moment, she wasn't about to let anyone see her crumble. She had been in tough situations before, but this was different. It wasn't just about the mistake. It was about the judgment, the public humiliation that came with it. As the CEO turned away, his words still lingering in the air, she swallowed hard and composed herself. She knew she had to keep going. The night wasn't over, and there was work to be done. But in the back of her mind, a small seed of determination began to grow. The way he had shamed her, belittled her in front of so many people, it wasn't right. It wasn't fair. And she promised herself, right then and there, that she wasn't going to let that moment define her. As the night continued, the atmosphere around her remained unchanged. The gala was still in full swing, and the guests were going about their evening as if nothing had happened. For the most part, she kept her head down, focusing on her duties. She wasn't sure if anyone noticed the way the CEO had treated her, but she didn't want to dwell on it. The last thing she wanted was to make a scene. However, as she moved through the crowd, helping guests and making sure everything was in order, she couldn't help but feel the sting of his words still hanging in the air. She was just a cashier, he had said. She wasn't sure if the shame he tried to make her feel was worse than the disappointment she felt in herself. It was hard to ignore, even though she tried her best. The evening was moving quickly, and the music, laughter, and chatter flowed as if everything was normal. But for her, it felt like a blur. The guests' voices were a constant hum in the background, and she couldn't escape the memory of what had just happened. It was a strange feeling. The realization that, despite being surrounded by so many people, she still felt completely alone. The event, which was supposed to be a grand celebration, felt more like a constant reminder of her place in the world, But then something unexpected happened. As the night went on, the event organizers made an announcement. There was going to be a surprise performance. This wasn't something that was planned in advance, but an impromptu idea to add a personal touch to the evening. They were looking for someone to help coordinate the act, someone who could work with the performers and get everything set up quickly. She was hesitant at first. She wasn't exactly prepared for such a task, especially given the stress of the evening already. But one of the organizers approached her, a kind smile on their face. "We could use your help with the performance," they said. "You seem like you know how to keep things in order." For a moment, she was caught off guard. She wasn't sure what the organizers had seen in her that made them ask for her assistance, but she nodded, agreeing to help. It wasn't the most glamorous role, but it would keep her busy, and that was all she really wanted at that point. As she moved behind the stage, she began helping the performers get ready. She arranged the props, made sure the microphones were working, and did her best to make sure everything was in place. It was simple work, but it was a welcome distraction from everything that had happened earlier. But then, as she was moving around the stage, one of the performers, an older woman, stopped her. "You've got a beautiful voice," she said, with a smile. "I heard you humming earlier. You should think about singing. You've got real talent." The words stopped her in her tracks. She had never thought much about her singing. She had done it when she was younger, back in her school choir, but life had gotten in the way. She had put her dreams on hold to focus on her job, on paying the bills, and taking care of the everyday responsibilities of life. But hearing those words sparked something inside of her. She smiled politely, unsure of how to respond. "I used to sing," she said softly, almost as if she were talking to herself. "But I haven't done it in a long time." The woman smiled again, giving her a knowing look. "Well, I think you should give it another go. The world needs to hear what you can do." For a moment, the idea felt almost impossible. She couldn't imagine singing in front of so many people. But at the same time, the words felt like a challenge to prove something to herself, to overcome the doubts and fears that had held her back for so long. As she moved back to the side of the stage, the idea continued to linger in her mind. The performance was about to start, and she had a job to do. But deep down, she felt something shift within her. Maybe it was the encouragement from the performer, or maybe it was the frustration of the earlier incident. But suddenly, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this night could be about more than just the shame she had felt earlier. Maybe it could be about something bigger. As the night went on, the thoughts of singing began to feel more like a possibility than a dream. She continued to help behind the scenes, getting everything ready for the performance. But with every task she completed, her mind kept drifting back to the conversation she had with the performer. It had been such a small moment, a passing comment, but it had planted a seed of doubt and hope at the same time. Maybe she could sing again. Maybe she could take that step. The clock was ticking, and the moment for the performance was quickly approaching. She helped move the last of the props into place and double-checked everything for the last time. The guests were still enjoying themselves. Some were talking in small groups, while others laughed and sipped their drinks. The gala was still as glamorous as ever, but it felt like it was all happening in the background of her own mind, which was preoccupied with something far different. As she stood at the edge of the stage, watching the guests and performers get ready, the event coordinator approached her again. "You're doing great," they said, their tone casual but sincere. "Hey, would you like to step in and do a little something yourself?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice betraying the surprise she felt. The coordinator smiled. "Well, we've got an extra spot for the final act, and I was wondering if you might want to take the stage. You've got the perfect presence, and honestly, I think you could bring something special to the event." Her heart skipped a beat. She had no idea that they were considering her for a performance, especially after everything that had just happened. But something inside of her stirred. Maybe this was the chance she had been waiting for, the moment to take control of her own story. For a brief second, She considered backing out. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. She didn't want to be the center of the spotlight, especially not after what had happened with the CEO. But then she thought of the performer's words, the encouragement she had received. What if this was her chance to prove to herself, and to everyone else, that she was capable of more than they thought? She looked at the coordinator and nodded. "Okay," she said, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. "I'll do it." The coordinator grinned, clearly pleased with her decision. "Great. Just a few more minutes and then you'll go on. Take a breath, relax, and enjoy it. You've got this." She didn't have much time to prepare, but the feeling of determination flooded her senses. This wasn't about anyone else anymore. This was about her, about showing herself that she could rise above the doubts and fears that had held her back for so long. The nerves were still there, of course. They bubbled up inside her like a storm, threatening to take over. But she didn't let them. She focused on the sound of her own breath, grounding herself in the moment. For the first time that night, she felt a sense of control, a sense of purpose. The music began to play, and the lights dimmed slightly. It was her turn to take the stage. As she walked out, the room seemed to quiet down. She could feel the eyes of the audience on her, but she didn't let it stop her. The stage wasn't as big as she had imagined. It wasn't as intimidating as she thought it would be. She stood tall, her heart still racing. But this time, she welcomed the feeling. She could do this. As the music swelled, she opened her mouth and let the first note escape. It was soft at first, tentative, but it quickly grew in strength. The sound of her voice filled the room, echoing off the walls, a perfect blend of emotion and power. She sang with everything she had, letting the music carry her away from the nervousness, from the shame, and from the judgment that had weighed her down earlier. With every note, the audience grew more and more captivated. She felt their attention, their energy, and it fueled her. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't flawless, but it was real, it was raw. And for the first time that night, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The CEO, who had been standing near the back of the room, watching the performance with a critical eye, felt something change within him. He wasn't the only one. The room was filled with the buzz of admiration as people turned to each other, whispering about the incredible voice they were hearing. The words he had said to her earlier seemed so distant now. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. In that moment, she was someone who had taken control of her own fate, someone who had risen above the judgment and doubt to show the world her true talent. The moment she stepped off the stage, her body was filled with an overwhelming mix of emotions. There was a rush of excitement, of pride, but also a deep sense of relief. She had done it. She had faced her fears, stepped into the spotlight, and given everything she had. And when the last note faded and the room erupted into applause, she could hardly believe it. The clapping was loud and enthusiastic, a chorus of approval from the audience who had been stunned by the power of her voice. For a moment, she stood there, still processing the fact that it had just happened. People in the audience were turning to one another, their faces full of admiration. She overheard one woman comment, "That was incredible. I didn't expect that from someone working the door." Another person, clearly in awe, said, "I knew there was something special about her the moment I saw her." It felt strange, like she was hearing the compliments for someone else. But she couldn't deny it. She had just shown everyone something they never expected. The applause seemed to go on forever. She felt as if she had won a battle, not against anyone else, but against the doubts and insecurities that had held her back for so long. The nerves she had felt earlier seemed to melt away, replaced by a quiet confidence. She was no longer just the cashier at a fancy gala. She was someone with a voice, someone who had just taken control of her own destiny. After the performance, people began to approach her. Some of them were well-known figures, guests at the gala who had been captivated by her singing. Others were part of the event's organizing team, smiling with pride at the unexpected talent they had helped discover. "You were amazing," one woman said with a smile. "I didn't know you could sing like that." She smiled back, feeling the warmth of the compliment. "Thank you," she said, trying to keep her composure. She was still processing everything, trying to understand what had just happened. "I haven't sung in years. I didn't think I'd be able to do something like this." Another guest approached her, a man who looked to be in his 40s, with a kind smile and a friendly demeanor. "I work for a music agency," he said, introducing himself. "What you did tonight was incredible. Have you ever thought about pursuing music professionally? You've got real talent." Her heart skipped a beat. She had never considered that. Music was something she had pushed aside long ago, something she never thought she would have the chance to seriously pursue. But hearing it from someone in the industry, someone who saw potential in her, made her wonder if there could be something more. I never really thought about it," she said, her voice quiet but curious. "I've always just sung for fun, when I had the time, but I never thought it could be anything more than that." The man smiled warmly. "Well, it's clear you've got a gift. If you ever want to explore it further, let me know. We could talk about some opportunities." Her mind raced. Opportunities, was that even possible? She had never imagined that something like this could come out of a night that had started so badly. But now, standing here, surrounded by people who saw something in her, she couldn't help but wonder. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe she had been so focused on surviving each day, so focused on just getting by, that she had forgotten to dream. For the rest of the evening, people continued to approach her. Some offered words of praise, others exchanged business cards, and still, others simply congratulated her on her bravery. It felt surreal, like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. But in the back of her mind, she knew that this was just the beginning. She didn't know where this would take her, but she felt a spark of possibility that she hadn't felt in years. As the night drew to a close, the CEO who had shamed her earlier came up to her. He stood there for a moment, as if unsure of how to approach the woman he had belittled. Then finally he spoke, his tone much softer than it had been earlier. "I just wanted to say," he began, "I owe you an apology. What I said earlier, it was wrong. You've got something special, something I didn't see. I was completely out of line, and I'm sorry." The apology caught her by surprise. She had never expected him to come back and admit he was wrong, especially after his harsh words earlier in the evening. But she appreciated the gesture. It felt like a small victory, not just for her, but for every person who had ever been underestimated or looked down upon because of their job, their status, or their background. She smiled and nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. "It means a lot to hear that." As he walked away, she couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The humiliation she had felt earlier in the night had been replaced by a sense of pride, by a feeling that she had proven something, not just to him, but to herself. The night was over, but she knew that it wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. As the final notes of the evening's performances faded into the night, the event slowly started to wind down. The guests began to gather their belongings, chatting and laughing as they prepared to leave. The once lively energy of the gala had shifted into something more subdued, but for her, the night was far from over. She stood quietly to the side, her mind still buzzing with everything that had happened. The applause, the kind words, the unexpected opportunities, it all felt so surreal. She had come into the night just trying to get through her shift, but now she was leaving with something entirely different, a sense of possibility. For the first time in a long while, she felt like her dreams could be more than just distant thoughts. She had spent so many years just surviving, going through the motions, working hard to pay the bills and get by. But now, after everything that had happened, she felt like something had changed inside her. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. She was someone with a voice, someone with potential. As the weeks went by, her life began to change in ways she hadn't imagined. The small steps she took toward pursuing music began to snowball into something much bigger. She had always been the quiet one, the person who kept her head down and worked hard, not drawing attention to herself. But now, she was stepping into the light, one small move at a time, and every step felt more empowering than the last. She was still working her regular job, but her days had started to feel different. Each morning, she woke up with a sense of purpose. It wasn't just about getting through another day. Now she had something to look forward to beyond the mundane routine of her work. She had music. She had something that made her heart beat faster, something that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. Her lessons had started to pay off. She was learning more about her voice, about technique, and how to connect with the music. She was singing. The more she practiced, the more confident she became. She found herself humming tunes at work, often getting lost in the music during quiet moments, forgetting for a moment where she was. It felt like she was waking up from a long sleep, discovering a part of herself that had been buried for too long. Then, one day, she received an unexpected phone call. It was from the music professional she had met at the Gala. They had been listening to her recordings and were impressed with how much progress she had made. "You're really coming along," they said. "I think it's time to take things to the next level. How would you feel about recording a demo?" Her heart raced at the thought. A demo. That was the kind of thing that people in the music industry did, not someone like her. She had never imagined she would be recording anything, let alone a professional demo. But there it was, right in front of her, an opportunity that she had never thought would be possible. "I'd love to," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, though she could feel the excitement bubbling up inside her. "I'm ready." The next few weeks were a blur of preparation and excitement. She found herself spending more time in the studio, working, with a producer to put together a demo that would showcase her voice. It was challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. She was learning things about the music business, about the technical side of recording, and about herself that she had never known before. There were moments of doubt, of course. She would hear the playback of her voice and wonder if it was good enough, if she was ready for this. But every time those doubts crept in, she reminded herself of how far she had come. From the quiet, uncertain woman who had been humiliated at the Gala to someone who was now taking control of her own future. It was a journey she had never expected, but one she was proud to be on. As the recording session came to an end, the producer turned to her with a smile. "That's it," they said. "You've got something special. We'll start sending this out to some people and see where it leads." She left the studio that day with a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. She was on her way. The path wasn't clear, and she knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like she was finally on the right track. A few weeks later, she received her first real piece of feedback. It was from a well-known music executive who had listened to her demo. They had reached out to her, expressing interest in working with her. She could hardly believe it. Someone in the industry had noticed her. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. She was a woman with a voice, someone who had taken a leap of faith and was being recognized for it. The phone call was short, but it felt like the beginning of something huge. "We'd like to meet with you," the executive said. "We're interested in working together." Her heart swelled with pride. She had done it. She had proved to herself that it was never too late to follow a dream, that with a little bit of courage and a lot of hard work, anything was possible. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stop now. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of clarity. Her life was no longer defined by her past mistakes or the judgment of others. She had built something new, something that was hers. And the best part? She had done it all on her own terms. As she walked out of the meeting, the weight of everything that had happened hit her all at once. She had come so far, from the shy, uncertain woman who had been humiliated by a CEO at a gala to a woman who was now being offered real opportunities in the music world. It was a transformation she could hardly believe. She looked up at the sky as she walked out of the building, feeling the cool breeze on her face. The journey wasn't over, but she was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. She had found her voice, and she was ready to make her mark.